Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to talk subfactions in Star Wars Legion, what the Wookiee arrival really means for the direction of subfactions, how that's going to work in this game, and what this might mean for the future. Not even the long-term future, but the near-term future in the immediate future, and what the rest of this wave could be like. So there have been a lot of speculation over the past year or two about subfactions. You know, are we going to get Gungans? It was hinted a long time ago by Alex Davey. Actually, Luke Eddy and Alex Davey both about Gungans and Geonosians like showing up, and that was kind of a big hot topic for a long time. I was very excited about it. I think they work pretty well, especially the Gungans. But I guess Geonosians kind of also make sense on, in being able to have other things that would still kind of work with the Clone Wars factions, but also be its own thing. And I think, it was kind of unexpected that the first one that we would get would seem to be Wookiees. And are Wookiees even really subfactions? And what does that really mean? So we're going to talk about that in today's video. If you guys are new here, be sure to enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You want to just be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos that automatically enters you to win. If you're already subscribed, then you're already halfway there. So let's go ahead and talk about what the Wookiees have given us so far and what this might mean for subfactions. So we've kind of seen some previews a little bit already. We've got two Wookiee commanders. We've got Wookiee command cards. They are Republic only, and while that initially seems kind of like, oh, I can't run these guys with the rebels, I don't think that's going to be that big of a thing, because as a subfaction, I always kind of envisioned subfactions as being something that doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be on its own, but it would get bonuses if it were on its own. Sort of how, in a way, like Marvel Crisis Protocol is kind of like this, Marvel thing, and you can make any team up you want, but if you do put stuff that's thematically together, you get bonuses for it. So if you run Captain America with Red Skull, it's not great, but if you happen to run the Avengers all together, you get some benefits, extra bonuses for that. And I feel like the Wookiee command cards are sort of doing that. Like if you run the Wookiee commanders that we have, one or two of the Wookiee commanders, and then also run Wookiee Special Forces, and you're kind of building a Wookiee army almost, you then can gain some extra benefits by playing these Wookiee command cards that work if a Wookiee commander is issuing orders to Wookiee troopers. And now all of a sudden things kind of just start to make sense and kind of fit more naturally. And that's certainly a part of it. I don't feel like we have the whole picture, though. We don't have the Wookiee Fluttercraft details yet. It does seem like the Wookiee Fluttercraft is going to have a part of it. It looks like it's going to be a support because, one of these cards gives issues to support units. And so are the Fluttercraft going to count as Wookiees, even though they're probably vehicles? Is it going to be like a Wookiee vehicle or a Wookiee trooper vehicle or something like that? It might have multiple subtypes. But also, I think another question is, are we going to see things that are addressed in the rules reference guide? Because here's a big thing I think that's interesting. I think it's very thematic for a Wookiee commander like Chewbacca or the generic but also unique Wookiee chieftain to be sending commands to other Wookiees, to ordering other Wookiees in battle. That seems thematic. That seems like it makes a whole lot of sense. But considering that list building would still have you include 3 core in a Republic list, because while this is a subfaction of Wookiees, presumably, it's still Republic, so you'd still have to have 3 clone troopers. And it doesn't seem as thematic for me to have Wookiees ordering clones, because the only people that ordered clones were either other clones or the Jedi or some Republic officer. And the Wookiees were, a world under there, but I just don't really see Wookiees, especially Chewbacca. Like maybe a Wookiee senator might have some kind of authority in the chain of command, but really, it just doesn't seem as thematic to me. So it would make a lot more sense, I'm thinking, if you could run all Wookiees. Like if somehow your core requirement were to have changed, or if your special forces can also count as your core requirement. Like I would think that I should be able to run Chewbacca and a Wookiee chieftain and Fluttercraft and Wookiee warriors as my entire list. Like there should be some kind of way to do that in my mind. Will there be? I guess we'll have to see. And it might even be that so my question is, it might even be something that ends up in the rules reference, once this wave comes out and they're like, okay, so maybe there's a new rules reference dealing with subfactions. Like, kind of like almost how like Games Workshop has like got their books. Maybe we'll have like a separate, it wouldn't be a whole book, but some important stuff in writing. Like, if you are, doing this, then maybe here's something that you need to consider if you're running subfactions. Because you don't need to put everything on the cards. It would also help if it was just in the rules. After all, other things are already just in the rules, like how many core you have to have. That's just part of the rules. So this could come in the form of a big rules change. So what might it be? One example might be, if you have at least one Wookiee Trooper commander, you can designate your list to be a Republic subfaction of a Wookiee subfaction. And if you're running a Wookiee subfaction and not just a general Republic army, you get to do the following. Maybe your special forces requirement changes. Maybe you can have more than 3 special forces. Maybe you can have up to 6 special forces. Maybe you can't have any clones. Maybe you don't need any, or maybe you don't need any clones. And it might be a can't or need. It may be a may or a must. I mean, like, that could be very interesting. Maybe you can't run heavies that aren't Wookiee specific. So in the future, like, maybe you can't run tanks, but maybe if they come out with, like, because there were some other Wookiee craft that you could see on Kashyyyk besides these fluttercraft. There were some larger ones too. So there is certainly room in the design space for Wookiee heavy supports as well. So, there's a lot of things like that could certainly work, and it'd be a kind of a cool way to make your Republic and make your subfaction feel very, very different. And I think if they do this, there's probably going to be more subfactions. I don't think this will be the only one. I think this is just the first of many. I think every faction should get at least one, if not more, over time. It'd be nice if every faction had lots of them over time. I think it's a great way to kind of expand the army and be like, oh, Republic got something, but the subfaction for Wookiees really got something new here. And that would be kind of a cool way to kind of make the factions even more distinct from within them. And so, I think it would be really fun if just it was the rules reference that said, hey, you know what, you can run 6 special forces now. That'd be great. Although, if that is the case, I hope you pre-ordered some of those. Because you're gonna run out of cards very, very quickly. I won't mind, with supply chains and shortages being what they are. We'll have to see how that goes. Now, I also wonder if you will have like mandatories if you're running Wookiees. Like, can you not run clones if you're running Wookiees? Can you not run Jedi? I think it would be thematic if you could include at least, like, maybe the rule is you must have at least one Wookiee commander. That would seem a little bit more thematic. So this way you could run like Yoda with a Wookiee subfaction. Like, that makes sense to me. And likewise, it shouldn't have to be Yoda. Maybe you want to run Obi-Wan with some Wookiees. Obi-Wan and the Wookiee Chieftain and some Wookiees. And then you'd have Yoda and Chewbacca and some Wookiees. Or Chewbacca and the Wookiee Chieftain. And then all of a sudden, out the gate from this new sub-faction of Wookiees, you'd have a lot of different build options, and it would make it feel a little bit more well-rounded from the get-go. And I think that'd be a fun way to do it. This is still just a guess based on some of the things that we've seen. We have to see a lot more things. It could very well be that the Wookiee Fluttercraft, while it's a support, also counts as a core or whatever, or something strange like that. The problem is, if it's not a Wookiee subfaction thing, you could use it in a clone-specific list and then just, have more ARC troopers and less Phase 1 clones or something like that. So, I feel like some kind of rules reference entry detailing subfactions and how Wookiees specifically among subfactions would work is going to be good. I think there should be similar things for everything else. Now let's move on to the next part of this. What about everybody else? How will everybody else get it? Because this wave is all about the Battle of Kashyyyk. What are Separatists going to get? There's no Geonosians in this wave. Are they only going to give Republic a subfaction? Well, maybe the Separatists' first subfaction will also be a curveball, because we know we're getting a super tactical droid in this, and the super tactical droid is supposed to have a couple different options and ways that it can be run. So like Kalani, or like different named versions of it, so you can run the super tactical droid in multiple different ways. Maybe the first, commander expansion that you actually wanted to buy more than one of, because maybe you want to run 2 of them at the same time. I don't know. But it's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to learn more about the super tactical droid, but this makes me think, what if we're going to get our first Separatist faction is an all-droid subfaction? Now that seems like, well, that isn't that Separatists already, and that could be the kind of counterbalance. Like not all of these factions don't have to have absolute symmetry. You know, the Republic's first sub-faction could be one that they didn't have very much of, and the Separatists' first sub-faction could be all droids and stuff that they already have a lot of. But if you think about it, General Grievous isn't a pure droid. He doesn't even count as a droid trooper. You know, and Count Dooku is obviously human, and Maul and Cad Bane and all of like your hero characters have been organics. Now we do have Field Commander as an option. We also do have now a T-Series tactical droid. So, you know, this wouldn't be the first ever droid commander, but this could be a droid commander that comes with cards kind of similar to this, that, hey, they can work anywhere, but they'll work really good if you're running all droids. And how would subfactions for that work? Well, it'd be probably a more accessible subfaction for a lot of people, since a lot of people are going to have droidicas and B1 battle droids and B2 battle droids and things like that already. But it would also give you some design space to kind of, hey, do you really want to run these Sith? Do you want to run Maul or Dooku or Grievous or maybe Asajj Ventress someday? Oh, you're not going to get the Separatist or the AI subfaction. Maybe they would call it an AI subfaction, and that's a way you would differentiate it instead of just, you know, you already have Droid Trooper as a subtype, but it could also specifically apply to units that have AI. Or something like that. So, or maybe that could be the bonuses. Maybe all of your droids lose AI if you're running all droids, although that might be a bit much. Maybe there's maybe your Separatist has an ability, or your commander, your super tactical droid might have an ability that makes your droids lose AI. And then, of course, if you can take out him, then all of a sudden they go back to AI and then become less effective. And so, like, that might be something that happens, but maybe you only get to do that if every unit in your army has AI or something to that effect. Maybe, you know, maybe the rules for an all AI subfaction would be much simpler, or maybe that won't even be a subfaction idea at all. Maybe there'll be something just totally later. Maybe it will be Geonosians. Maybe they'll come out in a future wave. It's kind of hard to say. But I think that's kind of the direction that they're going right now. I think it's going to be a rules reference update. So we talked about a little bit about Separatists. We've also got the classics. So I'll kind of speculate a little bit. I think if we're going with stuff that easily fits in, kind of like droids do, and kind of like how Wookiees seem like they would fit in with either being, you know, working with the Republic or on their own. I think stuff from the Mandalorian, Imperial Remnant, is a fantastic option for something that works by itself or also works alone. It's also a fantastic way for AMG to reprint stormtroopers in hard plastic. You can call them Imperial Remnant stormtroopers, and they can basically be stormtroopers that, when in their mock-up artwork, are painted dirty, right, and have different poses, and, you know, and then it can also serve as just also buy this pack if you are, you know, just want to kind of update your models for regular stormtroopers, and you can just paint them up nicer. You know, I think it pulls double duty. They can kind of do with an Imperial Remnant stormtrooper pack, kind of like the way that they did the Wookiees, of like, hey, it's got the same cards also for the regular, you know, for your regular Wookiees. So the Rebel players, you know, you can get updated models for your stuff if you want, but also here's a whole nother way to run them. So you might have a classic Stormtrooper card and an Imperial Remnant Stormtrooper card in these packs, and that could be a cool way to address that. And the same thing applies to Death Troopers as well, and this can be just a good way for them to kind of upgrade a lot of those models over time. But you can have them in different poses, offer new options for existing Stormtroopers, have Scout Troopers too, could show up in there. In Biker Scouts, almost everything that we've seen in the Empire, we've seen a little bit of in the Mandalorian. So it really gives you an option to have a lot of units that are kind of, you know, estranged from the Empire a little bit. Maybe they have some of their own tactics. Maybe they've learned to break a few regulations. And maybe you've got some kind of extremist commanders out there that have kind of taken the law into their own hands. And so, you know, Moff Gideon also is a character I think a lot of people are going to want. So it just makes a lot of sense that he would show up in this game, and having an Imperial Remnant as a faction, he could certainly work within the Empire. But if you run an Imperial Remnant on its own, maybe he's got some special things. Like maybe he, you know, doesn't have as many heavies. Maybe he doesn't have as many walkers. So maybe they don't get walkers, but maybe they can run extra special forces or extra supports, right, with his e-webs and stuff like that he's got. Maybe he gets access to new things if you're running only Imperial remnant, which would be pretty cool. Or maybe he gets to run the Darksaber if he's Imperial remnant. That's something to keep in mind. Maybe he gets to run the Darksaber. Maybe that's something he couldn't do if he was part of the greater empire, because hey, the Jedi were criminals, and so he might, maybe it's contraband for him to wield the Darksaber in public under the eyes of the Emperor. But now that he's got his own thing, like, look, I'm the law here. Oh, this is just Imperial remnant. No eyes of the Emperor. Okay, now he can use the Darksaber and be more of a threat. So like maybe there's some ways that they could do that. I think it would fit in really, really well. And of course, I know a lot of Rebel players have been asking for Ewoks. I'm sure we'll probably get them eventually. I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna be the first ones, because Ewoks are a very divisive topic for a lot of people. Some people love them, some people hate them. I'm kind of neutral. I don't care either way. I'm not a big Ewok fan, but Return of the Jedi was my first love for Star Wars. It's the first Star Wars movie I really remember watching from beginning to end. It's the first one I remember watching when I was old enough to remember it. In a lot of ways, Return of the Jedi was my proper introduction into Star Wars, and so I love Return of the Jedi, and of course it has the B-wings, it has that great space battle and all this other stuff. But Ewoks, I'm just kind of neutral on. I'm like, they were in the movie, but it wasn't all about them. But there's also a lot of Ewok stuff you could do, like with booby traps. There's a lot of cool things you could do with terrain, and they're already kind of showing that with Yoda, with like, hey, I get to place a barricade. What if the Ewoks got to place barricades? Or they got to turn barricades into weapons that made barricades explode, and things like that. I think that would be really fun. Maybe you could even have Ewok packs that come with some of their own terrain, like boulders that they get to drop on the battlefield and kind of displace units with them and things like that. Ewoks could be a tremendous amount of fun. But I don't know if this will be the first thing we get for the Rebels. I think more likely Saw Gerrera and his partisans kind of fit into the rebellion in the same way that Moff Gideon fits into the Empire with Imperial remnant, right? I think Saw's partisans fit perfectly, and they've already shown up in other games. Saw's partisans are in X-Wing, and they have some of their own pilots, and you can have them kind of do things their own way. They're almost like a sub-faction of the rebellion in X-Wing, and so I think that's a great way. And plus, they have some really, really, really cool alien costume designs. They've got like amazing, and I wonder if it's an opportunity for us to get the Borgullet in Star Wars Legion. But we'll have to see. Another one, Rebels have some really, really cool sub-factions. Another really, really cool one would be Enfys Nest and the Marauders. I think the Marauders would be a really groovy sub-faction. Although they're a little light on material right now. Doesn't mean you couldn't start adding them, right? Does not mean you couldn't start adding them. There might even be some crossover. I feel like Enfys Nest and the Marauders and Saw Gerrera and the Partisans could kind of be two halves of the same coin, or two sides of the same coin, and they could, like, if there was a way to kind of group them together and just call them like fringe rebels, right? Or maybe like when they're like a rebel cell, like an unorganized rebel cell, like that could be the sub-faction, in that you're kind of a fringe rebel cell or something like that. So, and that would certainly give you a lot of content to put into them, because you could have Saw Gerrera or Enfys Nest kind of leading these kind of a little bit more rough, a little grittier rebels, and I think the Marauders and their bikes and stuff like that would be really, really fit in perfectly with Legion. And Saw Gerrera and his partisans, definitely, you've got the street, you got the explosions, you got the incognito tactics and stuff that they were doing in Rogue One. I think both of these really, really fit well. And so I think they're great candidates for sub-factions, and they're also in recent memory, so they're going to have a lot of market value too. So that will be interesting. And I think the last one that's probably the number one most requested one right now is probably Mandalorians. How do we get Mandalorians into this game as a sub-faction? Because surely there are Mandalorians that could fit into any of the factions. Any of them. We've got, and going back to, like, let's start with Rebels and Empire. You've got Boba Fett for the Empire. You've got Sabine for the Rebels. They're already in game, right? You're going to have Jango Fett for the Separatists. You're going to have like Satine and you know, you go back to like the Mandalorian Civil War during Clone Wars and all this stuff. You've got, you know, Death Watch and then on the Separatist side, and then you've got like Obi-Wan and siding with like the Mandalorian loyalists, you know, or you know, you've got people on both sides of that conflict as well. And then of course, you know, you've got stuff from Star Wars Rebels. You've got you know, like just like the Concord Dawn and all of that stuff. There's a whole lot of ways to do this. So, like, is the Mandalorians somebody that are worthy of just kind of saying this is going to be their own faction, like they're going to have their own faction identity, or is it something that the rules reference could update? Would we get maybe like in the way that an old Star Trek Decipher Star Trek collectible card game went, and just come up with a non-aligned faction? Or or a scum and villainy faction. I mean, everybody wants a scum and villainy faction. To me, scum and villainy is not a faction, right? Like there are, you could say criminal syndicates are a faction. Which syndicate, right? You've got a lot of criminal. You've got the Hutt cartels. You've got Black Sun. You've got Crimson Dawn. You've got the Pikes, and I don't know like all of the alliances and where all of these people fit. We've seen the guilds, like the mining guild. You know, there's a whole lot of these separate, you know, that are but named and recognizable names now in the Outer Rim. So, you know, is there a way to say like Outer Rim unaligned? Because boy, they like scum and villainy is kind of like how we kind of group all of these kind of neutral factions. There's so much room with all of them, and I think that's a great place to fit Mandalorians, so people who have their own allegiances, you know. And I think it also would be worthy of perhaps another starter, right? I think that would be a great opportunity to get another starter box for the Fringe. And whether they want to call them scum and villainy, and I don't even think it needs to be a full 2-player starter. I think you do what Armada did with the Clone Wars, and you make a single player, a 1-player starter. It would be either a cheaper entry point or a same cost but with more content. Maybe it's a full army in a box. Maybe it's a commander, 3 core, and 2 supports. You know, maybe you do that in a box or something like that. Or maybe a commander, 3 core, and a special forces. You know, and it's at least a skirmish army completely in a box. At a cheaper price. Or maybe you throw a heavy in there. I mean, I don't think a heavy works in there. I think a heavy needs to be a separate purchase because something to really, you know, to kind of get you going. And maybe it could be a sail barge skiff. Maybe it could be a walker like the what those guys were using from the Mandalorian. I don't think they'll do another. I don't know if they'll do another ATST or something like that. But maybe one of those tank things that we saw, like anything that we've seen in the Mandalorian, I think is probably fair game for recognizability. And the big tank that he was driving in season 2, that the transport thing would be awesome. Probably a little too big, but yeah, there's a lot of really cool options, and I think Mandalorian is. If we want to go into like detail, like Mandalorians have some really cool additional options. I think there's some kind of like dragon thing, that like a suit kind of thing that they can wear, or they can get inside. All kinds of really cool stuff. So my point is, the Wookiees are heralding a whole lot of potential for sub-factions, and we're seeing kind of some of the first steps, and I like what we're seeing. I think it's really exciting to talk about. Thanks for hanging out with me today and talking about this. We're going to talk more. We'll see what the Fluttercraft brings. I want to thank you guys for watching. I also want to thank my patrons. If you guys haven't already, checked out some of the links in the description below. We've got some great social media links. If you want to buy a t-shirt and support the channel that way, you can do that. We've got some other links to Discord. Jump in our Discord and let's talk about it. Thank you so much, and as always, have a great day.